I'm ET Docking, and welcome to my presentation on layer 3 of the OSI model, which is, you guessed it, the network layer. By this point, we should have already spoke about the physical and data link layer of the OSI model. Now I'll tell you all about the network layer, which is where most of your routing takes place. Much like the previous layer, there are addresses in layer 3, but these are somewhat different. These are logical. So unlike the physical burned-in addresses, such as the MAC addresses mentioned in layer 2, these addresses are fully logical. These are known as IP addressing, and for the old people in here, IPX addressing. IPX addressing is not one that's commonly used anymore, but it's still there if you want to learn about it. These two are also a couple of the protocols which are used at this layer. So expanding on IP, we have IP version 4, which is our dotted decimal that everybody loves. One of my favourite sayings with IP version 4 is there's no place like 127.0.0.1, also known as home or local host. Ha ha ha. Anyway, enough jokes for now. Of course, as we all know, you have your IP version 6, which is a hexadecimal format. And if you do your calculations, I think that every grain of sand on Earth could have an IPv6 address. Yes, there are that many. With IPv6, you also have security and redundancy built in. Anyway, back to layer 3. Our routing does take place here, which is a very important thing to know. Two terms you may have heard of which apply to layer 3 is ARP, ARP, and RARP, RARP. ARP is Address Resolution Protocol, and RARP is, you guessed it, Reverse Address Resolution Protocol. So what does ARP do? So if you go into your ARP table and you see where it matches an IP to a MAC address, and that's fundamentally what it does, matches an IP to a MAC. So what do you think RARP does? That's right. And although ARP and RARP aren't specified in the OSI model, they come under the link layer of the IP suite, of which Internet Protocol comes under layer 3 of the OSI. This brings us nicely to our protocol section. So you may be wondering, what other protocols work with IP at this layer? Don't worry, I'll share my networking knowledge with you. We have IPsec, ICMP, IGMP, and RIP. RIP is a really old routing protocol and one of the first dynamic ones to be made. As you'll remember from the presentation on layer 2, we talked about frames. At layer 3, we're dealing with something slightly different, which is packets. And that's where the PU for IP and for the network layer come from. This layer is also responsible for fragmentation and reassembly of the packets. We've spoke about ARP and RARP, and that IP is a connectionless. But what does connectionless mean? So a simple example of connectionless is having two hosts, A and B. Host A sends some information to host B. It just keeps firing it out. But it's connectionless. So as it just keeps sending it out, there's no way to ensure delivery, and that's what makes it connectionless. At IP itself, it just sends out the packets, And if host B gets them, then it gets them. If it doesn't, it doesn't. But it's just firing them out. In the next presentation on layer 4, we might cover how this is overcome, depending how good they are at their presentation, obviously. So, to simplify what happens in layer 3, it takes information from the transport layer, encapsulates it into packets, sends it to the data link layer where it's converted into frames. And this conversion continues back and forth, and that's how data is sent around the network. So to summarise, we have spoke about IP, which is your Internet Protocol, IP version 4, which is your Internet Protocol version 4, your decimals, IP version 6, which is Internet Protocol version 6, your ARP, which is Address Resolution Protocol, RARP, which is Reverse Address Resolution Protocol, routing, which happens inside layer 3, packets, which is what's being sent about, what's being fragmented and all them fun things and reassembled, and the protocols. That's everything that I've got for you for layer 3. I hope you've enjoyed my presentation as much as I have, and if you have any questions, please feel free not to ask me. Thank you.